Hi, everyone. Welcome to GM Junior Scouting's podcast. Today is July 15th, 2016. And what we're going to look at today is some positions that what we look at, what we try to find in players, and what makes them a little bit difficult to evaluate. And the first position we're going to look at is center. It's a position that really a lot of people for years sort of overlooked. 15 years ago, you'd go draft a guy in the late rounds that was maybe 20 pounds underweight, real smart kid, and you could get by with a tough, competitive, hard-nosed kid. But all that's changed. Nowadays, you're throwing the ball so much more. The offenses are so much more complex. And not only the defense is more complex, but the defensive tackles are so much better rushing the passer. So overall, that center's got to be on top of his game. He's got to be able to figure out what the defense that he has to deal with is going to be. He's got to be able to make the protection call, and he has to coordinate with the center what's going on, who the mic is, what protection they're going to. So it's much more difficult. That's why I thought we'd start with that position today. And we're going to start one of our guys, Rick. He played offensive line in college, so he's probably got the best insight into actually playing and what it takes to make the transition in terms of what he looks for when he evaluates a center. So, Rick, I'm going to hand it off to you to start this off.
Thanks, Russ. Well, the main thing that I look for when evaluating a center is intelligence. He's got to be a really smart guy because he's the quarterback of the offensive line. He's got to read the defensive front. He's got to see where the Mike linebacker is. He's got to notify the blitz. He's got to make adjustments for his linemen, whether it's a slide left or slide right. He's got to make all the calls up front, and he's the leader of the other four guys up front. Another thing that I look for is athleticism. He's a guy that's going to have to be moving around. He's got to get to the second level. He's got to chip. He's got to pull. He's got to reach. Can he get a hat in front? He's basically got to be one of the more athletic linemen outside of maybe the left tackle that you have. He's got to be the one that's moving around. Another thing that I really look for is he's got to have a lot of strength in his base. You know, he's going to be at the NFL level. He's going to be going against a lot of 350-pound nose guards and 34 fronts. So he's got to be able to anchor down and really help protect the pocket. Some of the things that I think are hard to notify or to recognize is upside, because you can't really tell looking at his college tape how he's going to tell going against an NFL scheme with an increased speed with bigger and stronger guys, and you know you just can't always recognize what his upside is. Mike, what do you think?
I couldn't agree more about the intelligence part, but I think when you're kind of just evaluating a center from the very, very basic point is core strength. If he doesn't have that core strength, it doesn't matter how smart he is. I remember evaluating a guy, Anaka Lucas from Oregon, who, by all intents and purposes, just looked like a surefire NFL player, whether he just had a very good depth or anything along those lines, but he just never really had that base to be able to anchor down. And with those 34-style defenses, that's becoming an even larger importance to the position. When you also add into the fact of being able to play well in space as that help blocker too, I think that becomes the hardest thing to evaluate is that how well their hip flexibility is, because everything is so tight in those windows that as you evaluate on film. So those would be kind of the two major things that I would say are what you look for besides intelligence, core strength, and then the hardest thing is just making sure you understand what you're seeing from a hip flexibility to be able to kind of play in space to pick up any of those blitzes or anything along those lines. So, Russ, what are your thoughts on the position?
The three things to me that make it sort of, I don't know if it's difficult, but three things that I want to see when I evaluate a center. Firstly, obviously he's got a hand busy because he's snapping the ball, but how quick is his other hand in terms of getting within the interior defensive lineman's shoulders? Does he get a good fit with both hands? Is he able to snap the ball and get there? Because even if they're great athletes and they have core strength, if they constantly lose the battle of first hands, they're always going to lose, no matter how strong they are. So that's one of the big things I look for. The second thing, and it's not really a skill, but it's as I watch film, I try to keep track of how many times he ends up on the ground. Not when he has to cut block, but when he's just trying to block and trying to adjust. When a guy's on the ground all the time, to me, that's a major red flag. And I will say to me, and Rick, this was probably for you having played, it may not be as difficult to get a feel for, but as a scout who never played offensive line at a high level beyond high school, I look at it as it's easy for me to identify a guy who's smart. You can see him make the calls at the line of scrimmage. You can see if he makes the correct adjustment in terms of sliding to the right place, knowing where the pickups are. But I have a hard time sometimes figuring out if he's a naturally instinctive football player. When there are situations where he has no one to block and everything's done well, do guys run by him? Does he miss stuff? And what is the correlation? How many times can a guy run by him where you say, hey, he just got surprised, or he just has no awareness? To me, that's a very difficult one to find, because sometimes a guy misses because either he doesn't hear somebody yell to him, or he just for 1 second is looking the wrong way, and you don't want to kill a guy's instincts. But that, to me, it's different than intelligence, but it's very hard to evaluate. And I think if you don't get the whole picture and find a good center, I think it's very difficult in today's NFL to win if you do not have a smart center who understands what's going on, but also, like both of you guys mentioned, he has the strength to hold up in the middle, and he's athletic enough to block out in space. I think if you don't have that complete package, you're in real trouble. So, guys, thank you for this. We're going to come back in a few seconds. We're going to hammer on a little bit of look at the safety position, because nowadays safety is much different than it was 15 years ago. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll be back in 2 minutes.